Ishmael, we're talking
Hi.
today about the ancient Romans, right? You know those guys? You've probably heard of them. So they
Yes, I,
controlled a huge empire, which is centered around the Mediterranean Sea. And that empire is all about trade. At the heart of it, you've got wine, you've got olives, you've got furs, timber, pottery, ironwork, all kinds of stuff, like the height of modern technology, traveling back and forward across the waters. So going to Greece, going to the Middle East, those rich lands out there, the booming ports in Egypt, and then to Rome itself, of course, you know, the biggest city in the world. And that couldn't have happened without shipbuilding and ships. So without those ships, that empire, which has given us so many of the world's languages, it's given us the religion of Christianity, made that a global phenomenon, much of the legal principles, the political systems that Western civilization employs and has flourished. And so it's quite interesting to think about whether the designs from those ships actually came from a civilization far away, far to the east, one that's little studied in Europe, not that well known, that of the Malays.
well, we are not going to school our audiences, but today in our live episode of World Reframed, we are going to be discussing why this theory came about, what it says about modern Malaysia, and whether it could actually be true.
So, first up, why are we talking about this? So, it starts off with an academic, a researcher at the International Islamic University, Malaysia, and she's called Soleya Yaqub. And she produced a PhD thesis that claimed that the Romans learnt to build their ships from the Malay people. And she pointed out that civilizations on the Malay Peninsula have always been seafarers, right? There's so many islands, archipelagos, and the positioning is really interesting. It's on the major trade routes between India and the Middle East and China. So it's always been central to their culture, the sea. And therefore, it's not surprising that they developed an impressive range of ships, that they were very maritime people, and they always have been, and in many ways, they still are. So we have Chinese sources from the start of the first millennium, and they're recording that some of these ships from what's now Malaysia could carry up to 700 people, 600 tons of cargo. That's huge. And they came in many different forms. And the biggest of them had multiple masts, complex rigging, so they could sail in challenging winds.
And crucially for this argument is the construction of these ships. They were made without metal, with wooden pegs being used to join the boards. Also, the hull was constructed first before the interior frame was built inside it. This is important as it might seem easier to build the interior structure first and then attach the wood off the outside of the hull. But it was also how Roman ships were built. This, according to Yakub, supports her argument that the Romans copied the Malay blueprints.
Yeah, I have to say, Ishmael, I'm not really an expert on sort of construction of boats or actually any kind of woodwork. But having read around, it turns out that other seafarers of the times, like the Phoenicians, big power in the Mediterranean, and the Vikings as well, who who basically ruled the North Sea at that time, they actually
But
used this same technique as well.
to be fair, actually, they may have gotten the idea from the Malays.
Yeah, so I guess that's possible, but there isn't actually any archaeological evidence that the Romans, when they started building this, had any contact with the Malays. And other experts, actually including the university where Yakub works, have been pretty unanimous that the most likely scenario is that this is just a good way to start building complex ships, and different people basically worked it out at the same time on their own independently. It probably also doesn't help Yakub that in a previous academic paper, she cited a report from a satirical magazine, The Onion, which claimed that the ancient Greek language had been invented by researchers in the 1970s.
Well, I love the onion, but this academic makes unlikely and probably untrue historical claim. While we're spending our time talking about it, there are plenty of other things going on right now.
Yep, I think that's a very fair question, Ishmael. But this isn't just the kind of dispute about an academic who's accused of, making shortcuts or assumptions and perhaps being overconfident in their thesis, because it tells us quite a lot about modern Malaysia and the divisions that are within the country. Because it's not just us actually who are spending our time talking about it. The controversy has reached the Malaysian parliament and there's been a debate there. And to be fair, the attitude of most of the politicians was, this is a bit of an embarrassment. It's obviously not true. But Jakob did find some supporters who said, well, actually, we should probably be looking at this a bit more closely before we dismiss it. We should do a bit more research. She might be onto something here. And while online, she's been the subject of lots of mockery and jokes, and she actually came out and hit back at this. She said, in Islam, we shouldn't be criticizing researchers. We should be listening to them. We should be debating this, not mocking each other. But she does also have a number of defenders who've come onto her post to stand up for her.
Well, obviously, this plays into the multi-ethnic nature of Malaysia, where Muslim-majority Malays have traditionally enjoyed greater prestige than other ethnic groups, particularly compared with Malaysians or of Chinese or Indian heritage. Now, of course, both China and India can both point to the great achievements of their historical civilizations. So it's important for Malays also to recognize their own heritage.
Yeah, which to be fair is really considerable.
Exactly, but just perhaps not to the extent of teaching the Romans how to sail. So today's debate is part of a long-running saga which dates back at least to the country's independence, when Article 153 of their constitution specifically identified measures to privilege Malays and natives of Sabah and Sarawak in public service and education. This was designed to help them recover from historical marginalization under British colonial rule, when they were largely considered to roles in rural farming.
Yeah, and this is a subject we come back to, isn't it, Ishmael? I mean, it's amazing how many times in these World Reframed series we've touched on this subject of the control of history, decolonializing history, as some people put it, reframing history, I suppose some people might put it, and we just bump into it over and over again. And actually, whether or not the original claims are true often kind of fades into the background, because it just becomes a debate where the forces on each side are each trying to just make their own point and digging in.
And I'm sure our audiences would want to know what exactly is going on in Malaysia. What are people saying? And exactly so, one thing that struck me is a university distancing itself from its own scholar. It sends a troubling message. The International Islamic University Malaysia, IIUM, made this statement soon after her lecture went viral online. And I quote, "We believe the balance between academic freedom and scholarly responsibility is essential to preserving the credibility of academia." And without mentioning her name, they stressed that the comments were made in the academic's personal capacity and do not represent the university's official position, and added that it viewed the matter seriously and regretted the actions.
Yeah, and this just takes us into another subject, which is very, very big around the world, which is freedom of speech in academia. And when should the university be standing up for its researchers, supporting them? Is it right that it should reprimand them? I mean, after all, there's no way of proving whether this thesis is actually correct or incorrect. It's just a balance of probabilities. And I think that the danger is that universities can then be seen as trying to dictate the truth, decide the truth, rather than encourage discussion and debate. And, these can be seen as perhaps a retreat from intellectual courage, and that maybe it will discourage other people who have perhaps controversial ideas which aren't favored by politicians, from coming out and saying them.
Well, academic freedom is not about agreeing, it's about allowing room for ideas to breathe, even when they make us uncomfortable. If you are in Malaysia or outside Malaysia, just share your thoughts with us on World Reframed. You can also subscribe on our platforms, our channels on all the platforms for Global Southward.
Good night.
Good night.